I suspect that if you went through that same exercise here, you'd probably find, it wouldn't be the same sort of numbers, obviously, but you'd find equivalents of the same thing. There was just an enormous amount of waste.
Te Pāti Māori MP, Taku Te Whereas, has gone missing, presumed lost up his own backside.
I'm the holder of 3 undergraduate degrees and a master's degree, written plenty of stuff. I know the nuances of the English language and I know what I wrote.
Are we paying these people to front up, or are we paying them to fly to Wellington to eat their lunch? Should you really lose your career for refusing to take part in a 90-minute lesson about Māori culture? This government doesn't actually have any idea how to get economic growth. Show us what you made of, Prime Minister.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Okay, welcome to the program. You're with the Editor-in-Chief.
Duncan Garner, live.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Duncan Garner. Good to have you along. Good to see you. How much of a cut will the Reserve Bank make tomorrow to interest rates? It's a big deal. Adrian Orr is under pressure to go much further than he has signalled. Somehow we're going to breathe some life into this economy. How do you describe it? What dead cat bounce? And he's responsible. Ashley Church, property commentator, will join us shortly. Also tonight, the very best speech that I've ever witnessed in Parliament ever. I'll play you some of this. It's the best speech ever from Shane Jones, total class act, as he buries alive this racist bigot from Te Pāti Māori. I think you'll enjoy this. It was in response to a person called Taku Te Whereas, who is an MP for Te Pāti Māori, who I think stands for everything that we Kiwis oppose and detest. He's arrogant, in my view. He's unlikable, in my view. God, I love free speech. He's a racist, and he's dismissive of people like us, Pākehā New Zealanders. In short, I think that he thinks that we are lesser beings with less of a stake in New Zealand. And I think it's time that I called him out. The most vile MP that I've come across in 30 years in this game. Hands down. Get in touch through our social media. Duncan Garner Podcast on TikTok, also Instagram, or flick us an email, duncan@rover.nz. Let's go.
Duncan Garner, live.
Okay, the Reserve Bank Governor is expected to cut another 0.5% or 50 basis points off mortgage interest rates tomorrow. Just what the economy needs. We need some capital. We need some lower interest rates. We need to get the money flowing. We need to get the economy going, of course. And hopefully this all happens tomorrow. The problem is this guy's responsible for inflation. This guy's responsible for bringing it down, and he's responsible for the fact that he's been far too slow. We have been in the longest man-made manufactured recession since 1991, protracted and long due to Adrian Orr manufacturing this recession, staying there far too long and too deep. And for too long, the victims have piled up and the housing markets had scant signs of life. I also blame Grant Robertson in this too. What will happen and what needs to happen? Ashley Church is with us now. G'day, Ashley. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, nice to see you, Duncan.
Hey, so the Reserve Bank tomorrow will move the OCR, of course, downwards because that's what everyone's indicating. That's what the markets are expecting, 0.5, 50 basis points. Do you think there's a case to go further?
There is a case to go further, so it probably will be 0.5. I think on weighted averages, that's the most likely. But there is a pretty strong case that a few commentators are touting, and that is for a 0.75 cut. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that the predicament that the economy is currently in, and the other one is that there's an inevitability about a further cut beyond this one. And so the argument is, why would you wait? If the economy's in that sort of shape, why wouldn't you simply take that cut now?
It makes sense, you did right, because they're looking at a 0.5 and maybe a 0.25 or another 0.5. If that's the case, what are we waiting for? Just give us it in one bang, put a shot in the arm, bit of an injection of life, and go for it. I find the waiting to be pointless,
Yeah, it's kind of a nuanced question, because you've got to kind of go back and think about where we got to the position we're in now in the first place, and you've got to go right back to the cause of this, which is the collusion between the last government and the Reserve Bank, and the measures that the Reserve Bank took in relation to COVID. And what some would say some pretty extraordinary cuts in rates at that stage, which were designed to fuel the economy, which went, in my view, too far.
Yeah.
Way too far. And so what we've been going through over the last 2 or 3 years, 2.5 years since that happened, is the unraveling of the mistake that the Reserve Bank made. So firstly, those rates went up. They went really high. And they had to, Duncan, because as a result of the measures that were taken during COVID and just after COVID, the inflation rate got out of control.
Too much cash. Yep.
Because money was cheap. And so as a result of that, the Reserve Bank's now had to essentially backpedal from what it previously did and bring rates down, and it's going through this dance. And the irony of it is we all know what's happening. We all know where it's going. It's a bit like we're all sort of looking to each side of each other and saying, you go first, because we know that confidence is going to be restored. It's just that we're waiting on the Reserve Bank to do the things that we all know that it needs to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an economist, but I've spoken to many of them, and also spoken to a guy in your neck of the woods too, the head of Pi Funds in Hawke's Bay there, and he's a big KiwiSaver fund, and he said that 0.75 makes absolute sense because of where we've been, and we are unravelling that mistake. It was a huge mistake. Prices went up because there was all that money, and then prices have come back down. It's been, some people have lost out, Some people have been really hurt by this.
Well, you've had house prices go backward, which is something that doesn't traditionally happen in New Zealand. You've had, as you say, you've had businesses fail as a result of this. So there is a whole tranche of carnage which has taken place as a result of this, which in my mind, you can lay firmly at the feet of the Reserve Bank and to some degree Grant Robinson and the previous government. And as I say, in fact, when the new government came in late last year, 2023, there was actually a pretty strong case for replacing Adrian Orr with somebody who knew what they were doing.
I agree. He should have been dumped.
Totally, and they didn't do that. I don't know why they didn't do it. But as a result of that, we're still basically facing the ineptitude of a Reserve Bank, which in my view is out of control.
Yeah, I think they're out of control, but also out of touch. And I don't think they've had. I don't know what their economic data, where it's from and how good it is, but to me, I don't believe that they've been on the ground and the real sort of street economy, and I don't think they've felt the pain inside these offices. I think they've been closeted away, getting data fed to them in some committee room. They've looked completely out of whack. Actually.
Oh, totally. I don't want this to get into a big beat up on the. Well,
no, come on, let's make it.
I mean, this is the Reserve Bank that seems to employ more communication staff than it does economists.
Here we go.
This is a Reserve Bank that's more focused on wokeism than it is on actually running the economy and getting things under control. And under the watch of this particular Reserve Bank governor, we've seen a deterioration in confidence in the Reserve Bank, which used to be ironclad. It used to be that when the Reserve Bank governor said something, you could bank on that. Literally, no pun intended. That's no longer the case. They're all over the place.
Well, they've shown that too, haven't they? They said they wouldn't move until 25, then they moved in 24. So you couldn't bank on them. And so people lost their confidence. And if there's one institution you need to have confidence in, you may not have confidence in government, and I understand that because it's politics. But the central bank, and under governors, they've been Brash, Bollard, Graham, what's his face? They have been boring, and rightly so. They had to be, didn't they? But this guy's bringing in the Māori language and floating everything else. That's not your job, pal. No,
and you kind of got to wonder what's going on. They've also, and I haven't got the figure on the top of my head to quote, but I know that they've increased their headcount dramatically, and most of that headcount's been in areas that are non-related to economics. So, I mean, if you look at that and you look at what's been taking place there over the last couple of years, you can kind of understand why they've taken their eye off the ball and doing some of this other stuff.
Yeah.
But it leads back into, as you say, what's going to happen tomorrow. 0.5, I think. 0.5 is going to, and this is the other thing. There's a dance with the banks. So the banks react in a predictable way based on what the Reserve Bank does. They've basically worked out months ago, what they were going to do in relation to this. So rates all move a little bit down. We all move one chair over in this big game of musical chairs.
Exactly.
So we all wait. And there's a point. There's a confidence point that we will reach. And I don't know when it is. I don't think anybody does. When we go, okay, that's enough. We can now go out and we can start
That's the
growing
sweet spot. Yeah.
We haven't reached that yet.
No, but I reckon if you went 0.75, that might be the sweet spot. If you have to wait another 3 months to get to the 7.5 number, 50 and then 25, then you could be delaying a recovery by 3 or 4 months. And what's the point of that?
There is one, and it's the one small mitigation I'm going to make in favour of what the Reserve Bank's doing, and that is when we talk about inflation. So we have this thing called the headline inflation figure, which is 2.2%, which is within that range of 1 to 3% that they're supposed to be. So that's good. So they're you could say well within that. The problem with that is that figure breaks down two ways. It breaks down between what's called tradable inflation and non-tradable inflation. And tradable inflation is all the stuff that we bring in from overseas, and that figure's actually gone negative. That's actually dropping. Non-tradable inflation sitting at about 4.5% at the
Domestic
moment.
inflation.
So you could argue, if you were the Reserve Bank, you could argue that because non-tradable inflation is higher than their range of 2.2% of 1 to 3%, that there is a case for putting the brakes on a little bit longer to get inflation down. But that's pretty weak. That's pretty weak in the current
but you can use it though. You can put. I've looked at that. I think it's domestic inflation, whatever they call it. And at 4%, you're right. It's just above the band, and it's an excuse for him to go in 2 tranches, which is what he said he'd do. So he can stick to his story. I think he's been an ego out of control. I know he didn't want to beat up on him too much, but I mean he's caused He's caused this actually has been the longest man-made manufactured recession since 1991. It's gone on far too long, far too many quarters, and it's really, really hurt industries like mine, which were already going through a bit of pain anyway because technology and everything was being disrupted, have really felt it. We have to go to the market for advertising. We can't survive,
This is the thing too that I think it's really important that your viewers actually understand, because there's a lot of criticism over the handling of the economy by Nicola Willis at the moment. There's a lot of criticism about the fact that the economy hasn't recovered as quickly as people thought it would. Two really important things to consider. One, that all of this, everything to do with inflation is controlled by the Reserve Bank. So the government's got very little control over it other than keeping spending under control. But secondly, and this is the really big point, this has been entirely artificial. This has been a manufactured recession, and that's not a secret. The Reserve Bank has said that themselves.
They said so.
This has been a manufactured recession in order to get inflation under control. So the longer that inflation is carried on, and the longer that the economy's been in the doldrums as it has been over the last couple of years, you can lay the blame for that firmly at the feet of the Reserve Bank.
Yeah, but also a government that was fixated on spending. Even in the last 3 months, they were employing. They employed 2,000 staff in the last 3 months. They put them into government departments. They didn't find a dollar. They weren't happy spending. And I know they say government. Grant Robertson was arguing that government spending wasn't inflationary. I call that bullshit, because if you're pumping that much money into the market, I'm sorry. And look, some people did well. I mean, the wealthy New Zealanders, so the big business owners, supermarkets, big property owners, they did really well. Jacinda Ardern had a massive wealth transfer to those guys, so she went in there to try and save the poor and ended up really feeding the rich, didn't she?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. It was both parties. It was Bonnie and Clyde. In respect to what happened, the interesting thing too, and I don't know how far you want to veer into the politics of this, but when you look at the polls at the moment showing that there is the possibility of a return to a Labour government in 2026 and the next election based on current polls, you have to scratch your head and wonder what the hell people are thinking. Because if you look at what took place over that 6-year period, it's interesting because when we're looking at what's going on with Doge at the moment in the States and the Department of Government expenditure, and the enormous amounts of money that was spent on areas that they're only now being unravelled. I suspect that if you went through that same exercise here, you'd probably find, it wouldn't be the same sort of numbers, obviously, but you'd find equivalents of the same thing. There was just an enormous amount of waste.
It was pathetic ways too, because it was, they were putting treaty auditors in all different government departments, someone to keep an eye on, whether the treaty was being represented properly. All sorts of blowouts at the end of their term there, and it's unnecessary. And they have, I think, actually the figure is about $19 billion they have not saved, but they have transferred. They've redirected. So they're still spending as much. The problem for these guys is because there's a big hole in the taxation, they have to spend this money, so they were borrowing to survive.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was actually a case. I think these guys have been too careful. I think there was a case when they came in for actually going much harder and actually cutting some of that expenditure.
They're wusses, though. Actually, they're wusses too, mate. They're wussy too.
They are. I was going to say, this isn't a traditional right-wing government. It's a government that's somewhere in the centre that says we don't want to upset those people too much because they might vote for us at the next election. And so we'll be a little bit more careful with our spending, but we won't be as careful as people on the right might want us to be. And so you've got this position, which is kind of a halfway house, where we haven't taken the measures that we probably needed to get the economy back in place quicker. That's a hard argument when you're talking about healthcare and education and some of those other things, but there's lots of other waste in the economy that I think they could have cut.
Well, we've got a $45 billion welfare bill that goes out every year, and half that's super, of course, but $45 billion. When you're spending 140,
you totally don't. People forget that when Bill English left power, the debt as a proportion of the GDP, which is the amount of money that we owed as a proportion of what we earn as a nation in a year. Well, it was under 20%.
Yeah, no,
under 20%. The reason that's important, that's not just an empirical figure off over here. It's because for every dollar you lower the debt, what your country owes, that's less interest that the nation's got to pay, and that's more money you could spend on other things.
And now it's $10 billion. Now it's $10 billion. Actually, the cost of servicing this debt is massive.
Yep, and people forget that, so they look at that and think, "Oh, well, we'll worry about it in the future." No, you pay for it today. You pay for it today in today's dollars, and every dollar you pay on interest to service that debt and indeed to repay it is money that you can't put into other services.
And you're right.
Way away from the original topic.
No. This is important because this gives and this is a podcast we do what we like, and it gives it perspective. You see, so because it was a double whammy stuff up between Robertson and the Reserve Bank, Jacinda in there as well, and the price here, and the price has been really high, and and extended and a long time, and some of the pain we haven't even seen, people would have lost their lives. There are some people that have been in so much pain that they've exited life, and that's not extreme. That's truth.
No,
and
I
so
agree.
and the idea that these guys are fit for office again, the only reason I think actually that the people think they're fit for office again is because they're voting against Luxon to say, mate, you're weak. You're not standing for anything right now. It looks like David Seymour and Shane Jones and Winston Peters are your prime ministers. You're so weak that we might even have to go back over here. So they're giving him a bit of a protest nudge, knowing that it doesn't actually have an impact,
I hope it's just protest. I mean, when he came in, I defended him for probably 6 or 12 months, saying, hey, look, he'll come right eventually. He'll find his straps. He just isn't. He just isn't. Look, I have no doubt that he's a capable manager of people. I don't doubt that at all. He apparently did a pretty good job with Air New Zealand. But as a leader, as somebody that you can look in the eye or who can look us in the eye and say, these are the things that we're going to do and here's how we can fix what took place prior to our gala. He's just not there. And this prevaricating and compromising on stuff rather than taking a strong position is a betrayal of the very people that put him in power.
Yeah, that's
the
right.
problem that they've got at the moment is it's not so much a case of who would you put in place of him, because I actually think there's some talent in that caucus. It's already starting to emerge. The problem you've got is how do you explain that to the electorate halfway through a first term?
Well, the Democrats couldn't in America, you see. And so what Trump's done, he's come on in there, and Trump has shown what decisiveness personified looks like. He's gone in there. Now, he's doing exactly what he said he'd do. Now, no one should be surprised at what Trump's doing because he's delivering on everything he said he'd do. Now, in many ways, Luxon has clung on to, some of this identity politics and things, and he promised that he might get rid of these things. So he hasn't been decisive. Remember, he's only a first term. He's only been there one term, and that's another thing.
Key was as well, and Key was a master. So you can't use that excuse because Key had been there for about the same period of time, and he took that role on and just adapted to this. This is just
different people.
They are. Yeah.
This guy's a lightweight version of it,
He is a lightweight version, and I guess, Mike, but going back to your point too about compromising, or my point on compromising, I'm actually not sure whether he's compromising or whether we're actually seeing who he really is and whether his politics are a lot more further to the left than we thought they were. Because some of the stuff with Key, there was a bit of theatre to it. You knew why he did things, and you knew he was doing it in a way that was. And you had Key as the sort of the front man, the showman, and then in the boiler room you had English and Joyce who were the masters of the strategic
they
stuff.
sit on those guys, but what Key didn't have, crucially, we're so far from topic, but that's great. It's good to catch up. I always enjoyed your take on this. What Key never had was Seymour and Peters on the flanks. You've got two guys who are exactly the same. Seymour's a junior Peters. Peters is Wiley. These guys are 80, and he's almost 80. He's seen everything, Peters, so he'll play the game. He's actually been very responsible. And Seymour, who's agitating to get elected again, you see, because he doesn't want to go missing. And they mean business. You don't get many shots at this stuff, actually, so they mean business.
So here's the flip side of this, and here's where Peters is clever, where he's the consummate politician. So when you look at the potential of a coalition of the parties of the left, the one thing that National's got going for them at the moment is that anybody with half a brain's going to look at that and say the multi-party, the Greens and Labour, not a chance in hell. Not a chance in hell. Even if I don't like the current government, there is no way I'm going to elect that. Here's the thing, though. Hipkins has come out over the last couple of weeks. Hipkins, who prior to the last election said that we don't want to deal with Peters because he's unhinged. And
look at those guys.
Now saying we're going to talk to Peters and see whether or not there's the possibility of an accommodation. Now, Peters is a wily old campaigner, and he may not be prepared to do that, but he's not going to say he won't do it because he's going to use that as
correct. He'll just string them along. He's done it before to both parties,
totally.
And he's a master at it. We all know how it works now. We've seen it up close and personal. And the thing is, if Luxon's loyal to him, and he has been. The other thing, that's Luxon's compromise may well be mistaken as compromise when it's loyalty. He's making sure the deal's the deal. You got to. Hey, I don't think it's a great deal, but it's a deal, and he's keeping it.
No, even the deal. I mean, I sort of scrutinised it when it first came out because there was two agreements, if you remember. There was one with ACT and there was one with New Zealand First. And when you looked at that, there was a lot of stuff in the coalition agreements that probably should have been national policy that was only there because New Zealand First or ACT introduced it. But I was pretty happy with it. I looked at it and thought, if they do all of this stuff, I'll actually be a reasonably happy camper. And even on some of that stuff, Winston's starting to drop the ball. Winston's starting to drop the ball on quite a few of the things that he said he would do. The gender ideology stuff started well, isn't necessarily following through. Well, not necessarily. He's not following through on a lot of that stuff.
But it's not the most important. Yeah, but like with Seymour and the Māori stuff, it's not the most important stuff. The most important stuff's getting the economy ticking because you can't pay for anything else otherwise, you know. So the most disappointing thing for me is that Luxon said it'll be firmly focused on inflation and the budgets and the economy, and he actually took a back seat and let the others go on the treaty. You know, it was disappointing 12 months. Let's see if he can pull it back, but let's hope there's a big cut tomorrow and we can get some life back in the economy.
Totally.
Yeah, I take it you're not voting Labour. Okay, mate. Good on you, Ashley. Nice to see you, mate. Appreciate it. Cheers. Okay.
Duncan Garner, live. It's the Slam Dunk.
Okay, I promise you this, and I mean it. We need to put out a missing persons report because Māori Party MP, or Te Pāti Māori MP, Taku Te Ferris, has gone missing, presumed lost up his own backside. I'm about to show you New Zealand's most arrogant twat of an MP that I've ever come across. And I've thought about this long and hard, and I've watched this guy, and I've watched with interest the radicalisation of the Māori Party over the past few years. And they're no longer a party for all New Zealanders. They're not even a party for all Māori, in my view. Many in the mainstream political media and wider media will not tell you this. They wouldn't for a moment do what I'm about to do. They're happy to beat up David Seymour, but when it comes to holding the left-wing parties to account, I think they're missing in action. Sadly, they're not as brave or courageous. Te Pāti Māori have turned so radical, so angry, they wear their tattoos on the outside. It's all show, but sadly for Māori voters, there ain't much go. I regret that we're so divided and polarised now, but we are. It's just the nature of this political beast at the moment. David Seymour has achieved more for Māori with the opening of St Stephen's under his charter school legislation than Te Pāti Māori have achieved in the last 2 years. What have they achieved? They organised a hikoi, a membership drive. That made people feel good, but it achieved jack. Nothing's changed. But the Māori Party's odd now. They are oddly angry. It's like they want revenge on the Pākehā system. They'll stop at nothing, I reckon, to tip this country up. They're angry. Chris Hipkins from Labour will suffer getting too close to these guys. He should call them out, but he's got no balls either. We've had 50 years of redress through the treaty settlements claims, and it seems Tamahiti and Willie Jackson, they want to keep dragging it out for as long as they can. Why would these Māori want to narrowly define the loss when it's more lucrative to keep this thing going, carry it on for years ahead? We don't want that. Now, Taku Te Ferris is a new MP for Te Pāti Māori. He makes it clear that people won't like him. And he's okay with that because he's here for his people, he says. He's 46 with 3 kids. He's not going away. He tells us he's highly educated. Who says that?
I'm not afraid of consequence or anything like that. I made some statements on the day I wrote the speech. I'm the holder of 3 undergraduate degrees and a master's degree, written plenty of stuff. I know the nuances of the English language and I know what I wrote.
Good on you, mate. And I find him smarmy, up his own backside, a destructive, arrogant tosser. Now, I don't say it lightly. Some of the MPs in Te Pāti Māori come across blatantly racist and anti-Pākehā, so let's call them out. If it was Pākehā MPs doing this to Māori, we would call them out. And this is him, arrogant to boot. I'm calling out Taku Te Ferris. That's his name, this is him. Recently chewing his way through the Peter Williams' submission on the Treaty Principles Bill. He eats through it and has a drink and sort of smug and barely listening. And then rather than ask Peter a question at the end, he makes a statement basically saying Peter's out of touch and goes stick it. So disrespectful. And so out of touch with the feeling and the thoughts of New Zealanders. He was forced to apologise recently by Parliament's highest committee, and he refused to apologise for contempt in English. He didn't do it in English. He said the apology in Māori means way more to him than saying it in English.
Ka te whakangungua ki tōku marae ki te kāinga. Ahau, te tahi, ko oti ahau, te tuhi, I ngā tohu paetahi e toru.
What an embarrassment. Shane Jones rightly calls him out. I'll play Shane shortly because that's one of the best speeches I've seen in 30 years. The best speech. Jones is coming of age. Tariana Turia and Peter Sharple, they were co-leaders of the Māori Party. They'd be horrified by this guy. This new breed are also busy trying to look the part, like they're in New Zealand's next top model. They're all about show and little substance. Like walking and, talking. They're repeating each other's narratives. This Ferris is one giant piece of work. He's out of touch. Arrogant, vile, prancing, anti-Pākehā racist who thinks not much, unless you're, of course, Māori. He is, in my view, a racist. And where taxpayers are paying for him to be there. He's entitled and arrogant, dismissive towards the system and dismissive towards Pākehā and dismissive towards English language. He likes to think that he sits above Pākehā because of his drop of Māori blood. He's better than us. Māori are humble, proud people. Absolutely. He needs to read the room and look critically at himself. He can't, of course, because he can't see anything wrong. Have a good look at him now. And remember, he refused to do his apology in English, only in Māori. Only in Māori. And that triggered Shane Jones, the people's champion in my view after this, to make the best speech that I've seen in Parliament in 30 years. A class leader. Really, really important speech. Enjoy this.
The Honourable Shane Jones.
Mr. Speaker, it's more in sadness than anything else I take this call, because Māoridom has such high expectations. When the younger generation come to Parliament, they'll not only bring the passion of the electorate they represent, but they'll bring enough humility to respect the House, which reflects the inordinately strong traditions of our democracy, one of the longest unbroken chains of democracy in the civilised world. There are three legs to this offensive stool. Number one, the committee must determine whether or not the words uttered were misleading. Number two, members of the committee must determine whether or not the misleading statement was known at that time to be actually inaccurate. And number three, it must have been the intention to mislead the House. Those three legs are laid out in our parliamentary encyclopedia. This young, inexperienced, largely unknown member has come to this House, levelled serious attacks against other members, which caused our party, through our whip, to make a formal complaint. These decisions are not taken lightly, but sadly the complaint cannot deal with the deeper virus. And the virus is that member, day after day, swaggers and shows an utter contempt for the obligations and duties that fall upon us as taxpayer representatives of the public. Look no further than the surreptitious manner of the politician, of that politician's apology. An attempt not to offer the apology in both languages. And I'm saddened by that, Mr. Speaker. I know that Te Reo Māori is one of our official languages. I know the member is allowed to use Te Reo. The people, however, who deserve the apology on the basis of a finding of contempt, they ought to have heard that apology in both languages of the treaty. An unwillingness to offer an apology in English shows contempt for the vast majority of the New Zealand members of the public who pay his salary. Of course, this is a small element of seeking to deploy and weaponise tikanga and Māori culture to pretend if you have Māori blood and you're in this parliament, you don't answer to the same rules and regulations. I pray and hope that the New Zealand public at the next electoral experience deliver an appropriate response to that level of superciliousness. We cannot afford to have this ethnic warping of our democracy. If you come to Parliament, you accept, along with your fellow New Zealanders, an obligation to uphold the duties of being a parliamentarian. If you do not want to uphold those obligations, get another job. Don't come and deprecate, don't come and take for granted, and do not trivialise the inordinate privilege that many other Māori members of the iwi community, of the Taitonga community, have sought to achieve the status of being here to replace such people as Eruera Tirikatene, such people as Patterson from Ngaitahu in the 1800s, such people as the All Black Tutakawa Wiley. Do you really think that they would have thought there was any honour in giggling, trivialising, demonising this Parliament through that display of not only committing an act of contempt, but accusing my leader, Winston Peters, and others of being liars? Now, there may be elements in our iwi community who think this is a gross overreaction. This is not an overreaction. This is a level of the obligation that sits upon everyone. Because when we are here as parliamentarians, Mr. Speaker, we have an indivisible duty. And it's about time, and this report actually affirms the importance of not splitting rules to suit people who enjoy a different ethnicity. Yes, he did make an apology in Te Reo. I've been speaking Te Reo since that guy was born. And I would have had no hesitation in offering an apology with humility to every single New Zealander who I have treated with contempt, and I take for granted the money they pay every day for the handsome salary we enjoy as public servants. No, this member beats to a drum where he believes he's impervious. He's beyond any of this criticism because he's blessed with some pure non-Muggles Māori blood. Shame on you for bringing your own people into disrepute. Shame on your leaders for not insisting you show whakaiti, you show humility. And shame on you for misrepresenting and bringing whakamā to the long list of leaders who have held the positions of the Māori seat. There is no honour in this arrogant, no honour in this childish, no honour in this contemptuous display of disregard for what it means to be a parliamentarian. And I'm very proud to stand and give this speech and to stand with the architects of this report. Too afraid to turn up in the courtyard of Parliament's highest committee. No, it's in here. I can quote, the invitation was given. The invitation was not taken up. From the very member who says that a number of us are too afraid in our political life to stand up and be counted. So to the committee who have come up with this report, sadly there are likely to be other instances. Let it be a lesson for those of us who treat with absolute privilege that we are here, that this report is an indictment. This report is a very sad day. And hopefully, sir, there is the opportunity for the person in the wrong to learn a lesson. That without whakaiti, there is no rangatiratanga. The rangatira who does not understand duties and obligations is whakahihi, whakamanamana. These are Māori words that we know very deeply, and they call for a level of modesty, humility, and the tohu of a rangatira.
Duncan Garner, live.
Right, I can leave you there. I can leave it there. There's you've brilliant speech from Jones. Brilliant speech from Jones. I'll get those two in for a debate because I don't think New Zealanders have any understanding or have any idea that Ferris was there, and this is what he stands for. The Māori Party are activist, and they clearly don't like Pākehā New Zealanders. It is no way to build our future. I feel really strongly about this. We will go nowhere if we keep employing people like this. All right? That's us. Thanks for your feedback and your support. Get in touch through our social media, Duncan Garner Podcast on TikTok and Instagram, or flick me an email at duncan@rover.nz. To my team, thank you guys. I'll do this again tomorrow. Remember, life's no dress rehearsal. There's no curtain raiser. This is it. We live in one of the best places on earth, despite people like Takata Ferris. So get out and enjoy it. Have a great day. Take care, New Zealand.
Duncan Garner, live.